afternoon from Los Angeles, and welcome to Stock Market Today, sponsored by Interactive Brokers. On today's show, we're going to be taking a look at three charts, two in the semiconductor sector. We have Micron and Inphi on tap, and we're also going to be checking in with Winnebago, set to issue its quarterly earnings report tomorrow morning. It's Alyssa Corum here, joined by Ken Shreve. And Ken, looking at the major indexes, we saw strength heading into the close, more new highs, the Nasdaq finishing up 0.7%, the strongest of the major indexes for the day, just continuing to make gains here. I mean, we're on quite a winning streak.
Yeah, I mean, 7 straight gains for the Nasdaq. Looks like we're going to get a close up near its session high, up about 0.7%. So an all-time high for the Nasdaq, all-time high for the Dow, all-time high for the S&P 500. Kind of sounds like a broken record, but this year-end rally is looking, pretty good, and still seeing a lot of good action in individual stocks.
That's right. And just really quickly, what should the investor mindset be at this point? Because we are trend followers, so the trend is your friend here. It's not time to start thinking, you need to get too conservative. Cut out the noise, follow the trend.
Yeah, exactly. And I mentioned in the big picture column last night, it is actually not a bad time as we head into the end of the year to kind of take a look at your portfolio. Maybe you've got 3 stocks in there. Maybe you've got 5, 6, 7 stocks. But just kind of take a look at how the leaders are acting. I mean, if you were invested in early mid-October when we got that confirmation of a new uptrend, you probably got some nice gainer stocks that broke out of bases. But take a look at some gainers. If they've hit 20%, maybe consider trimming a position or just locking in a gain. If you feel like you're heavily exposed to the market, maybe on margin, just identify your leaders and your laggards, and don't be afraid to do a little portfolio pruning before the end of the year, but head into the new year optimistic.
Sounds good. Yeah, take stock of your stocks.
Exactly.
And let's talk about some individual names, starting off with Micron. The ticker there is MU, which gained about 2.8% today in heavy volume. It's also been on quite a win streak. Today's gains came on the heels of its quarterly earnings report. Now, it did show declines on both the top and bottom lines year over year, but those numbers were better than expected, and some very telling guidance from management as well. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, just like the Nasdaq, 7 straight gains, I think, for Micron Technology. It's a little bit extended now after a breakout over a 50 buy point. And you mentioned another quarter of declining earnings and sales, but that's been well documented in recent quarters. Actually, the 4th straight quarter of declining earnings and sales. But Micron, in the conference call, said they just reported their fiscal first quarter results. They said that their business is going to put in a bottom in the current quarter, their fiscal second quarter. So big reason why chip stocks have been rallying for many weeks is in anticipation of a recovery. And, I think Micron confirmed that today. And probably what we knew already, that the chip industry is close to a bottom, and a lot of chip companies are seeing better times ahead.
Yeah, that's right. So this stock, though, was a little bit tricky to handle because it broke out pretty shortly before the quarterly earnings report. So would this have been a potentially good options play?
Yeah, well, we mentioned it actually last week ahead of earnings. We were looking at a strike price around 50 or 51, and it was actually a pretty reasonably priced trade. So anytime you're thinking about an option ahead of earnings, you sometimes you can buy it 2 or 3 days ahead of the fact. Sometimes, a little earlier than that. But we discussed this as an option on IBD Live, and I think it worked out well for buyers.
All right, and elsewhere in the chip space, let's check in with Inphi. Ticker there is IPHI. Now, we'll be taking a look at a weekly chart, but for the day, it looks like it gained about 1.4%, carving the right side of a new base here, is about 4% below potential buy point.
Yeah, I mean, this is a stock that broke out a few weeks ago, and then it just came down to its 10-week moving average and made a perfect test. That's the red line that you see on this chart. So you see a big breakout several weeks ago, and then a pullback to the 10-week moving average, and now it's rallying back. So it's showing pretty good technical action, and it is approaching a buy point here. So we'll see if it can muster a breakout, but just yet another chip stock that's performing very well.
Yes, we definitely like looking at group trends and what are the top groups, and chip makers definitely in focus and have been, especially we've been seeing even more positive headlines related to the trade war.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the first stocks to break out in the chip sector were in the chip equipment group, especially names like Applied Materials and Lam Research. So the chip equipment firms started moving first, and that was actually a couple months ago. But it's, chip stocks have been getting a lot of attention on our video after the close every day, and certainly getting a lot of print at investors.com and IBD Weekly too.
Yeah, that's right. And last but not least, let's check in with Winnebago, because it too is working on a base, heading into its quarterly earnings report tomorrow morning. Now, in recent quarters, it looks like the growth has slowed a little bit, but still we could potentially see a move on earnings. We did last quarter see a pretty sizable move in Winnebago shares.
Well, I was looking at the estimates for the current quarter, and again, they're reporting tomorrow before the open, and they are expected to produce a 10% rise in sales. So you do have an interesting turnaround going on here. So, of course, 3 straight quarters of declining sales isn't all that exciting, but you look at sales for the current quarter, expected to be up, and then really accelerate sharply the next quarter. So you do have a sales turnaround expected to take shape here, and these RV makers, the stock is acting well, maybe in anticipation of a pretty healthy economy in 2020 and strong demand in the RV market.
Yeah, and you mentioned with Infi how it was able to find support at the 10-week line. We're also seeing that with shares of Winnebago, so a pretty strong looking base pattern here, so we'll keep an eye on this one tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I mean, just a solid breakout you can see here, and just a nice test of the 10-week moving average, and it's actually working on a new base. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a good quarter tomorrow morning.
Well, speaking of, I think we might be touching on this on IBD Live tomorrow morning. So that is it for today. But before we go, we do have some announcements for you. It says from Mike Webster, and he says, watch IBD Live. Oh, and follow at M Webster. Are you guys writing this down? M Webster 1971 on Twitter. You won't regret it. He is talking about a lot of great stuff, not only on Twitter, but on IBD Live along with the rest of the crew.
That's right. So tune in IBD Live Friday morning. Alyssa's going to be on the show, and it'll be a great episode. And folks, Mike Webster on Twitter, outstanding posts on a daily basis at M Webster 1971. Great follow on Twitter.
All right. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow to finish off the week.